All right, buckle up, everyone. Before we dive into this wild ride, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and tell me in the comments, what's the most shocking betrayal you've ever witnessed? Your answers might just make you rethink everything you're about to hear. Let's get into it. The Shattered Dream. It was a crisp, sun-drenched morning in London, and Eleanor felt like she was living a dream. In the mirror, her reflection returned a nervous but joyful smile as her stylist meticulously adjusted the delicate lace veil over her braided hair. The ceremony was just hours away, and every detail, from the hand-embroidered gown to the fresh peonies adorning the elegant suite, felt plucked from a fairy tale. Today will be perfect, she thought, just as her best friend Chloe entered with a glass of champagne. Ellie, today's your day. Don't let anyone or anything ruin it, Chloe whispered, trying to calm Eleanor's trembling hands. Yet, the fragile peace of that moment shattered when Leo's mother, Lady Rowena, swept into the room unannounced. Dressed in an outfit more suited for a grand gala than a morning wedding, Lady Rowena made no attempt to conceal her distaste as she scrutinized Eleanor from head to toe. Is that the gown you chose? I thought it would be something more fitting for the occasion, she drawled, her smile a thin, venomous line. Eleanor felt the invisible slap, but forced herself to maintain composure. She'd endured Lady Rowena's subtle jabs since the beginning of her relationship with Leo, but never imagined she'd have to suffer them on such a special day. Chloe, always quick to defend her friend, stepped forward. She looks absolutely stunning, doesn't she? It's an exclusive design, nothing like those generic boutique dresses, Chloe retorted, a defiant smirk playing on her lips. Lady Rowena's frown deepened, but she offered no reply. She simply spun on her heel and exited the room, leaving behind an unbearable tension. Hours later, the ceremony began. Eleanor was breathtaking as she walked towards the altar, but something about Leo seemed distracted. Throughout their vows, he avoided eye contact, constantly checking his phone. Each notification vibrating in his pocket seemed more important than the woman standing before him, promising to love him through thick and thin. Have you ever felt like you were second best to a phone? Let me know in the comments below. When the reception arrived, the situation only worsened. Lady Rowena seized every opportunity to whisper cutting remarks about Eleanor's guests, referring to them as boisterous or out of place. Leo, instead of defending his wife, chose silence, or worse, chuckled nervously to ease the tension. The breaking point arrived when Lady Rowena, glass of wine in hand, approached the microphone for a toast. What began as seemingly kind words soon twisted into public humiliation. Leo, darling, you've always had a noble heart. I hope this marriage is everything you dream of, though some dreams don't always end as we expect, she said, her gaze fixed directly on Eleanor. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor felt the weight of every stare in the room, and before she could fully process what was happening, she heard a murmur behind her. Turning, she saw Leo raising his voice in an argument with Chloe, who was attempting to confront him about his indifference. "Leo, for God's sake, defend her!" Chloe cried, losing all patience. The room fell into stunned silence as Leo, in a fit of rage, slapped Eleanor across the face in front of everyone. The physical impact was slight, but the emotional pain was devastating. Eleanor stumbled, but stood firm as murmurs erupted into shouts of indignation. "This is over," she declared, her voice ringing through the hall. Without waiting for a response, she ripped the ring from her finger and hurled it onto the main table. The entire room watched as she, with dignity and fierce determination, walked towards the exit, leaving behind a sea of whispers and astonished faces. Chloe caught up with her outside, embracing her as the tears finally flowed. That night, Eleanor made a decision. She would not allow anyone else to humiliate her or make her feel less than she was worth. "This isn't the end, Elle," Chloe said, holding her tight. "It's just the beginning of something much better." Eleanor nodded, wiping her tears. Though broken, something within her began to ignite. The spark of a woman determined to rebuild herself. A new chapter begins. That night, Eleanor sought refuge in Chloe's small apartment, a modest but warm place, decorated with travel photos and shared memories. Sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea she barely touched, Eleanor replayed the events of the last few hours. Every insult, every look of disdain, and above all, Leo's public slap, repeated in her mind like a film she couldn't stop. "Elle, do you want to talk about it?" Chloe asked, offering her a blanket. Eleanor shook her head, but her eyes betrayed the sea of emotions she tried to contain. After a few minutes of silence, she finally spoke. "How did I get here, Chloe? I thought he was different, that he truly loved me, but he let his mother insult me, and worse, what he did in front of everyone." Her voice broke. "He's a coward, Elle, but you know what? You're not. Look, this is the worst night of your life, but it can also be the start of something better. Tomorrow, we'll go to your place together and get all your things. You don't have to face this alone." Eleanor nodded, grateful for her friend's strength. However, fear and uncertainty gnawed at her. How would she face Leo and Lady Rowena tomorrow? How could she start over after investing so much time in that relationship? The next morning, after a sleepless night, Eleanor and Chloe headed to the apartment she shared with Leo. With the help of Daniel, Eleanor's older brother, they planned to get in and out quickly before Leo could return from work. "Are you sure you want to do this now? We could wait a bit longer," Daniel asked as he parked his van in front of the building. "No, Dan, I need to close this chapter today," Eleanor replied, trying to sound confident, even though her hands trembled. Upon entering, the familiarity of the place hit Eleanor like a cold bucket of water. Photographs of their trips together still hung on the walls. The scent of his cologne still permeated the air, and the echo of arguments from recent months seemed to resonate in every corner. Chloe wasted no time. She grabbed boxes from Daniel's car and began packing Eleanor's clothes and belongings, while Eleanor stood motionless in the center of the living room. "Elle, don't look back. Just pack what you need. This place isn't worth your tears," Chloe said firmly. Suddenly, the door burst open. Leo had arrived earlier than expected. His face was marked by a hangover, and his dark gaze reeked of rage as he saw Eleanor with her friends. "What the hell is going on here?" he shouted, slamming the door shut. Daniel, with his imposing height, stepped between Leo and Eleanor. "She came to get her things. Don't make this any harder than it already is," Daniel said calmly, but with a clear threat in his tone. Leo ignored Daniel and went directly to Eleanor. "So this is what you do? Run away like a coward? After everything I did for you?" he sneered, poison in every word. Eleanor looked directly at him, feeling rage replace fear. "What you did for me? Allowing your mother to humiliate me? Hitting me in front of everyone? No, Leo, you destroyed this, and I'm not staying for you to keep trampling on me." Leo advanced towards her, but Daniel stopped him with a firm hand on his chest. "Don't take another step, Leo. I won't warn you again." For a moment, it seemed Leo would respond with violence, but Daniel's presence made him back down. Breathing heavily, he slumped onto the sofa as Eleanor and Chloe continued packing. "You know what, Eleanor? No one else is going to love you like I did. You're too complicated." His voice was a cruel whisper. Leo's words pierced like knives, but this time Eleanor didn't let them destroy her. Closing the last box, she turned to him and said, "I'd rather be alone than with someone who doesn't know what respect means." With the help of Daniel and Chloe, they loaded the boxes into the van and left the apartment. As they drove away, Eleanor took one last look at the building where she had imagined a happy future. Now, it was only a symbol of what she was leaving behind. At Daniel's house, Eleanor began to unpack. Each item she placed was a small step towards her new life. Chloe, as always, was by her side. "Elle, I have an idea. Remember that fashion design project you always dreamed of? It's the perfect time to start it. You have talent, you have creativity, and now you have freedom." Eleanor smiled for the first time in what felt like days. Although she still felt the weight of the past, a small spark of hope began to burn within her. "Maybe you're right, Chloe. Maybe this is the beginning of something much better." What would you do if you were in Eleanor's shoes? Drop your advice in the comments. Rising above the shadows. In the days that followed, Eleanor began to adapt to her new reality. Although the shadow of the past still haunted her, her determination to rebuild her life grew with each small step. Daniel, always protective, offered her to stay at his house as long as she needed. But Eleanor knew she didn't want to depend on anyone for too long. One morning, as they ate breakfast together, Daniel broke the silence. "Elle, I don't want to meddle, but have you thought about what you're going to do with your career? Or where you're going to live?" he asked, checking his phone. Eleanor sighed. She had spent the last few days sorting through her thoughts, but still didn't have a clear plan. "I've been thinking about it. Maybe I should pick up my idea of starting a design business. It was always my dream, but I put it off because of—" Eleanor paused, remembering how Leo had belittled her aspirations again and again. "Because of him," Daniel finished, his tone stern. "Well, he's not here to stop you anymore. Do it, Elle. I know you can." That afternoon, accompanied by Chloe, Eleanor began visiting some shops for rent. Although the prices were high, she found a small space in the heart of Shoreditch, perfect for a design studio. The walls were peeling and the floor needed renovating, but Eleanor saw potential in the place. "Are you sure you want to start this now?" Chloe asked, kicking a piece of debris on the floor. "If I wait until I'm completely ready, I'll never do it. This is what I want, Chloe, and I'm going to make it work." With the help of Daniel and a few friends, Eleanor began remodeling the place. During long nights painting walls and arranging furniture, she found moments of laughter and camaraderie that reminded her of the power of human connection. Little by little, the space began to transform into a reflection of her creativity and passion. One night, while reviewing the final details of the shop, Daniel handed her an envelope. "This came for you," he said, with a worried expression. Eleanor opened the envelope, and her heart sank as she read the first lines. It was a letter from Lady Rowena. Although it contained no explicit threats, the words were filled with contempt and venom. "I hope you realize what you've lost. Leo doesn't deserve someone like you, and you'll never be enough for anyone. Maybe you should consider going back where you belong and stop embarrassing yourself." The pain was immediate, but something inside Eleanor had changed. Instead of crying or feeling defeated, she tore the letter into small pieces and threw them in the trash. "I'm not going to let her keep controlling my life. Neither her nor Leo," she said aloud, more to herself than to Daniel. Days turned into weeks, and the studio finally opened its doors. Eleanor decided to name it Rebirth, as a symbol of her new life. Although clients were few at first, word of mouth began to spread, and soon her talent caught the attention of a local designer who offered her a collaboration on a major project. However, just as things seemed to be improving, the past came back to haunt her. One afternoon, while working on a design, she received a message from Leo. "Eleanor, we need to talk. I haven't stopped thinking about you." Reading the message was like a splash of cold water. For a long moment, Eleanor remained still, her thoughts torn between rage and confusion. How could Leo have the audacity to seek her out after everything that had happened? "Who is it?" Chloe asked, approaching as she saw Eleanor's expression. Eleanor showed her the message, and Chloe let out an incredulous laugh. "Please, that man has no shame. Let me respond." "No, Chloe. I'll handle it my way." After thinking for a while, Eleanor decided not to respond, blocked Leo's number, and continued with her work, determined not to let him interfere in her life again. But the incident left her uneasy. Although she was moving forward, the fear that Leo or Lady Rowena would try to sabotage her remained. That night, as she closed the studio, she noticed an unknown man watching her from the corner. Although she tried to ignore him, the sense of danger grew when he began to walk in her direction. She quickened her pace towards her car, feeling her heart pound. When she got home, she told Daniel what had happened. "Do you think it was someone sent by Leo?" Daniel asked, clearly worried. "I don't know. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I can't help thinking something isn't right." Daniel nodded and promised to be alert. Eleanor, for her part, decided not to be intimidated. Although the fear was real, her determination not to succumb to Leo or Lady Rowena's control was stronger. What's the scariest thing someone has ever done to try and intimidate you? Share your stories. Let's raise awareness. Escalating threats. The days following the strange encounter brought a mix of progress and tension for Eleanor. On one hand, her rebirth studio began to gain recognition. Satisfied clients recommended her unique designs, and for the first time in a long time, Eleanor felt she was building something of her own. On the other hand, the constant fear that Leo or Lady Rowena would reappear kept her on high alert. One afternoon, while working on a special order for an important client, Chloe arrived at the studio visibly agitated. "Eleanor, you have to see this," she said, showing her phone. It was a social media post from Lady Rowena. In the text, laden with insinuation and disdain, Lady Rowena made indirect comments about certain women who don't know their place and how some relationships end when one person isn't up to par. Although she didn't mention names, Eleanor knew the post was directed at her. "Doesn't she have anything better to do?" Eleanor asked exasperatedly, setting her pencil down on the table. "She wants to provoke you, Elle. Don't give her the satisfaction. But I think you should take precautions. That woman is not well," Chloe said, her voice firm, but her gaze revealing concern. Chloe was right. Eleanor knew it, but she refused to live in fear. That same night, as she closed the studio, an envelope slipped under the door caught her attention. Opening it, she found a photograph of her wedding, torn in half, with a handwritten message. "Don't think you can escape your place." The impact was immediate. Eleanor's hands trembled as she held the photo, and her mind began to fill with questions. Had it been Leo? Lady Rowena? Or someone else acting on their behalf? Back home, Daniel and Chloe insisted that Eleanor report the incident to the police. "This is no longer a simple manipulation game. It's harassment, Elle. You can't let it go," Daniel said, visibly annoyed. Eleanor nodded. Although she hated the idea of reliving everything by explaining, she knew she had to protect herself. The next day, she went to the police station and filed a report. However, the officer's response was less encouraging than she expected. "Madam, without clear evidence that this person poses a direct threat, the most we can do is register the complaint," the officer said, as he typed on his computer. Eleanor left the station feeling helpless, but also more determined than ever not to let fear control her. A few days later, fate offered her an unexpected positive turn. During a local design event in Shoreditch, a famous fashion editor became interested in her work. Impressed by her designs, he proposed a collaboration for an upcoming issue of his magazine. "This could be the boost you need to take your brand to the next level," Chloe told her excitedly when Eleanor shared the news. Though excited, Eleanor knew that this success could attract even more attention from those who wished to see her fail. Her intuition was not wrong. One night, while working on the design for the magazine, she received a message from an unknown number. Opening it, She saw a photo of her studio taken from outside, followed by a text. "Be careful what you wish for." Fear gripped her again. But this time, she was not willing to remain silent. She called Daniel, who arrived at the studio in a matter of minutes. "We're going to install security cameras. If they want to intimidate you, they're going to regret it," Daniel said as he inspected the entrance. The cameras were installed the next day, and Eleanor felt a little calmer. However, the feeling of being constantly watched did not disappear. Every time she walked through the streets of London, she felt eyes following her, shadows that disappeared when she turned to look. One day, while reviewing the security footage, she noticed something unsettling. A man in a dark cap loitered in front of the studio. Although he didn't try to enter, his behavior was suspicious. Eleanor took the recording to the police, hoping that this time they would take action. "This is more concrete. We will investigate, but we suggest you be very careful." "Have you noticed anything else strange in recent days?" the officer asked. "Yes, I feel like someone is following me, but I'm not sure who it is." Eleanor's voice trembled as she spoke. That night, while dining with Daniel and Chloe, she tried to find answers. Why would someone want to hurt her that way? How far were they willing to go? "Elle, maybe you should consider hiring private security, at least until we know who is behind this," Daniel suggested. Although reluctant, Eleanor knew her brother was right. Private security was expensive, but her peace of mind was priceless. In the following days, a guard began to patrol the studio and Daniel's house. Although the guard's presence gave her a sense of protection, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder if the danger was closer than she imagined. What do you think Eleanor's next move should be? Tell me in the comments. Direct confrontation. The decision to hire private security offered Eleanor a brief reprieve. Although the guard couldn't be present all the time, his mere presence seemed to deter anyone who tried to approach. However, the fear persisted. Nights at Daniel's house were long, and insomnia began to take its toll. Eleanor woke frequently, startled by noises that turned out to be nothing more than the wind or the footsteps of a neighbor. One night, while reviewing some sketches in her room, Daniel entered with a serious expression. "I just spoke with the guard. He says he saw someone lurking around the house a few hours ago, but when he went out to check, no one was there," he said, crossing his arms. Eleanor's face tensed. The thought that someone was so close was terrifying. "Do you think it could be Leo?" she asked in a whisper. "I don't know, Elle, but whoever it is, we're going to find them." Daniel leaned over and took her hand, giving it a firm squeeze. "You're not alone." The next day, at the studio, things seemed to return to normal. Clients arrived, orders increased, and for a moment, Eleanor was able to focus solely on her work. However, that peace was abruptly broken when an unknown man entered the premises. He was dressed informally, with a cap that hid part of his face. He seemed nervous, looking around as if searching for something. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked from the counter, trying to sound professional despite the knot in her stomach. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly approached the counter, resting both hands on the surface. "Are you Eleanor?" he asked in a low, almost threatening tone. Eleanor swallowed, but didn't show her fear. "Yes. What do you need?" she replied firmly. The man stared at her for what seemed like an eternity, before taking an envelope from his pocket and placing it in front of her. "A message from someone who wants to help you," he said with a sinister smile, before turning and leaving the studio. Eleanor waited until the man was out of sight before opening the envelope. Inside, she found a handwritten letter. "Eleanor, stop what you're doing before things get worse for you. This is not a warning. It's a promise." Eleanor's hands trembled as she held the paper. Panic began to take hold of her, but she quickly called Daniel and Chloe. "This is too much. I can't take this situation anymore," she said, showing them the letter when they arrived at the studio. Chloe, always the most direct, took the letter and tore it into pieces. "Elle, you can't let them intimidate you. That's exactly what they want." Her voice was firm, but her gaze betrayed concern. Daniel, for his part, took more drastic measures. He installed additional locks on the studio door and began accompanying Eleanor every time she went out. Although these measures helped, the feeling of being watched did not disappear. That night, while they were having dinner together, Eleanor received a message on her phone. It was a photograph taken from outside the house, showing her, Daniel, and Chloe sitting at the table. The text accompanying the image read, "Do you really think you're safe?" Fear paralyzed Eleanor for a moment, but Daniel reacted immediately. He took the phone and called the police, demanding that a patrol car be sent to the area. "This is no longer harassment. It's a direct threat," he said angrily as he spoke with the officers. Although the police promised to investigate, Eleanor knew she couldn't rely entirely on them. That night, as she tried to sleep, her mind was full of questions. Who was behind all this? Lady Rowena? Leo? Or someone else with a darker intention? The next day, while Eleanor was working at the studio, an unexpected client arrived. It was Leo. His presence filled the room with palpable tension. He was wearing an elegant suit, but his expression was somber. Eleanor felt a mixture of rage and fear at seeing him. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not hiding her annoyance. Leo raised his hands in surrender. "I just want to talk, Eleanor. Please, listen to me." "Talk? After everything you did?" "I don't think we have anything to talk about." Eleanor's voice was firm, but her heart pounded. "I know I was wrong, Eleanor. I've been thinking about us, and I want to fix things." Leo took a step towards her, but Eleanor recoiled. "Fix things? Do you think a few nice words will erase everything that happened?" Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't let the tears fall. Leo tried to continue, but at that moment Daniel entered the studio. "What are you doing here, Leo?" he asked harshly, putting himself between him and Eleanor. Leo raised his hands again, this time in defeat. "I just wanted to talk, but I see I'm not welcome." He turned to Eleanor one last time. "This isn't over, Eleanor." And with those words, he left the studio, leaving Eleanor trembling with rage and fear. Daniel slammed the door shut and turned to his sister. "This is enough, Elle. We need to make sure he doesn't bother you again." That night, Eleanor made a decision. Not only was she going to protect herself, but she was going to confront whoever was behind all this, no matter the consequences. The final showdown. The encounter with Leo had left Eleanor in a state of constant alert. Although she was terrified, she was also determined not to be intimidated. That night, while talking with Chloe and Daniel in the kitchen, she began to draw up a plan. "I'm not going to let Leo or Lady Rowena, or whoever is behind this, take away what I've built. But I also can't keep living with this constant fear," she said, her voice filled with determination. Daniel nodded, arms crossed, and a worried expression on his face. "Then we need a strategy. First, let's make sure you're completely protected. We already have the cameras, but we could install more. We should also talk to a lawyer in case this escalates. And let's not forget the police," Chloe added. "Even if I don't trust them much, we must keep them informed of everything." Eleanor knew her friends were right. The next day, they met with a lawyer to explore her legal options. The lawyer, an older man with a calm demeanor, listened carefully as Eleanor described everything that had happened. "Eleanor, what you're describing is harassment and clear threats. We can request a restraining order against Leo and his family, but I'll need strong evidence to present the case," he said, adjusting his glasses. Eleanor handed over the photographs, messages, and security camera recordings, hoping they would be enough. "With this, squad, we can start, but keep in mind that this process may take time. Meanwhile, make sure you stay safe," the lawyer concluded. Although the responsibility of the meeting gave her some peace of mind, Eleanor knew there was still a long way to go. That night, while reviewing the security cameras from her phone, she noticed something strange. A dark figure briefly appeared in front of the studio and then disappeared into the shadows. She immediately called Daniel, who arrived at the scene accompanied by the security guard. They reviewed the recordings more closely and discovered that the intruder had been there for at least 15 minutes, moving around the building as if looking for a way to enter. "This is not a coincidence. They are trying to intimidate you," Daniel said, furious. "What if they try something worse?" Eleanor asked, feeling a knot in her stomach. Daniel didn't answer immediately, but his gaze said it all. They were dealing with someone who would not give up easily. A few days later, while Eleanor was working in a park and receiving a special order for the magazine, she received an unexpected call. It was Lady Rowena. "Eleanor, we have to talk," Lady Rowena said in an icy tone. "I have nothing to say to you, Lady Rowena. Everything you had to say you already made clear," Eleanor replied, gripping the phone tightly. "Oh, darling, it's not an invitation, it's a warning. You know Leo isn't someone who gives up easily, and neither am I. Do you really think you can go on with your life as if nothing happened?" Lady Rowena's laugh on the other end of the line was like a knife twisting in her chest. Eleanor hung up before Lady Rowena could say anything else. Her breathing was agitated, but instead of succumbing to panic, she picked up the phone and called her lawyer. "Lady Rowena just threatened me. This has to stop. What else can we do?" she asked, trying to keep calm. The lawyer assured her that the call strengthened her case, but that they should proceed with caution. Meanwhile, he advised Eleanor to avoid any direct confrontation. That night, fear turned into rage. Eleanor was not going to let Lady Rowena or Leo dictate her life. With the help of Daniel and Chloe, she decided to organize an opening event at her studio, an act of defiance to show that she would not be intimidated. On the night of the opening, the place was filled with friends, clients, and curious onlookers. Eleanor wore one of her most striking designs, a red dress that radiated confidence and power. Although her heart pounded, her smile did not falter. "This is incredible, Elle. Look at everything you've achieved," Chloe said, hugging her tightly. However, the peace of the night was broken when Eleanor noticed someone in the crowd. It was Leo. He was standing at the back of the shop, a glass of wine in his hand, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor felt the air escape her, but she forced herself to maintain composure. "What are you doing here?" she asked, approaching him with firm steps. "I just came to congratulate you, Eleanor. It seems you've done something interesting here. Though I wonder how long it will last," he said, with a sarcastic tone. Daniel appeared next to Eleanor in a matter of seconds. "Leo, get out of here before I throw you out by force," he said, his voice filled with anger. Leo raised his hands with a mocking smile. "Calm down. I was just admiring the place. Congratulations, Elle. I hope you enjoy your moment of glory." And with those words he left, leaving behind a cloud of tension. Eleanor knew that this would not be the last time he would try to interfere in her life. But as she watched her friends and clients enjoying the event, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe she couldn't control everything that happened, but she could decide how to respond. Although the studio opening was a success, Leo's presence cast a shadow over the celebration. Eleanor couldn't ignore the fact that he seemed determined to continue interfering in her life. However, she was not willing to give up. That night, as she closed the studio with Daniel's help, the determination in her eyes was evident. "Elle, I know you don't want to hear it, but I think you should consider hiring additional security for the magazine event," Daniel said, as he checked the door lock. "You're right, Dan. I don't want to give them the opportunity to ruin anything else," she replied, sighing. In the days that followed, Eleanor focused on the preparations for the magazine project. Her designs were bolder than ever, reflecting not only her creativity, but also her strength and resilience. However, as she worked, the feeling of being watched persisted. One afternoon, as Chloe helped with the final stitches, a noise outside the studio caught their attention. Daniel, who was nearby, went out to check but found no one. Only a withered flower placed in front of the door. Although it seemed like an innocent gesture, Eleanor knew it was a message. "This is no coincidence, Chloe. Someone wants to remind me they're watching." Eleanor carefully picked up the flower, trying not to give in to fear. Chloe crossed her arms, clearly annoyed. "Well, yes, we're not going to stop for their games." Her voice was firm, but her eyes reflected concern. The day of the magazine event finally arrived. Eleanor, dressed in a suit of her own creation, looked imposing. The venue was elegantly decorated, and the attendees were a mix of clients, designers, and figures from the fashion industry. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. However, the perfection was fleeting. As Eleanor presented her designs on the runway, she noticed a familiar figure in the audience, Lady Rowena. She was sitting in the back row with a cold, impenetrable expression. What do you think will happen next? Will Eleanor finally confront Lady Rowena, or will the intimidation escalate? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the thrilling conclusion. Your support keeps these stories coming. The ultimate triumph. As Eleanor presented her designs on the runway, she noticed a familiar figure in the crowd, Lady Rowena. She sat in the back row with a cold, impenetrable expression. Eleanor's heart clenched, but she forced herself to maintain composure. This was her moment, and she wouldn't let anyone ruin it. "Just as I expected," Lady Rowena said, when Eleanor approached her after the show. "Utterly ridiculous. Do you really think this will succeed?" Eleanor looked her straight in the eye. "It has, and it is, Lady Rowena, and I won't let your venomous words deter me." The crowd began to murmur as they recognized who was speaking. Leo, who had sneaked into the event, suddenly appeared beside his mother. "You seem awfully confident, Eleanor. But remember, this world is tougher than you think." "You're right, Leo," Eleanor retorted, her voice sharp. "And I learned that from you and your mother. But I also learned how to stand up for myself." Do you think Eleanor is doing the right thing by directly confronting them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Just then, Daniel and Chloe stepped forward, shielding Eleanor from the pair. "I think it's time you two left," Daniel said firmly. Lady Rowena scoffed. "Well, you really believe you can stop us, don't you? We have influence, Eleanor. You'll regret challenging us." "Try me," Eleanor replied, a resilient smile gracing her lips. And at that exact moment, a group of photojournalists began to snap pictures. News of the confrontation quickly spread, but not in the way Lady Rowena and Leo had hoped. Instead of humiliating Eleanor, the incident highlighted her bravery and resilience. The story of a strong woman standing up against power and arrogance resonated deeply with the public. Weeks later, Eleanor received news from her lawyer. With solid evidence and overwhelming public support, the court issued a restraining order against Leo and Lady Rowena. Finally, Eleanor had the peace she deserved. A new life, a bright future. Eleanor's rebirth studio flourished. Her designs were featured in numerous prestigious fashion magazines, and she became a symbol of resilience and independence. She not only built a successful business, but also inspired countless other women to live authentically. One day, while reorganizing her studio, Eleanor found her old wedding ring in a box. She picked it up, admiring the glistening metal under the lights. It had once been a symbol of a shattered dream, but now it was merely a memento of the past. Eleanor smiled, then placed the ring into another box, no longer in pain, but instead with a sense of liberation. Were you surprised by how Eleanor handled the ring? Share your feelings. "Ready for Paris, Elle?" Chloe asked, entering the studio with 2 coffees. "More than ready," Eleanor replied, her eyes radiant. "We'll conquer Paris, and then the world." They walked out of the studio together into the warm London sunshine. Eleanor knew that the road ahead might still hold challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had learned that one's worth is not defined by what others think, but by their inner strength and the ability to overcome all difficulties. Eleanor's life had truly reborn. She not only found success in her career, but also found herself a strong, independent, and inspiring woman. Her story is a testament that no matter how much you're knocked down, you can rise stronger than ever. Thank you for following Eleanor's dramatic journey. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and comment your favorite part of the story. See you in the next one.